I'm Lisa Hansen. I'm the senior pastor here at Pasadena Presbyterian Church, and on behalf of the congregation, it is my honor to welcome you all here into this beautiful space. We hope that you enjoy your time in our space and invite you to come join us on Sunday mornings. So we get quite busy on Sunday as well. It's good to see your faces here. We are advocate readers in our congregation and so delighted to be working with the Pasadena Public Library in this initiative. So again, I welcome you all here, and now I'm going to invite Tim McDonald forward to give you some additional information. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to check, is my microphone on? Can the folks in the back hear me? Great, terrific. Let's find some sunshine. Dr. Hansen, thank you so much for hosting us tonight, and to the members of the congregation of the Pasadena Presbyterian Church. This is a wonderful venue for music and for the conversation we're about to have with our author. My name is Tim McDonald, the director of the Pasadena Public Library, and I'm very glad to see you here today to celebrate our annual One City, One Story author event. One City, One Story is a community tradition where we hope to broaden and deepen a love of reading and literature and promote a tolerance of understanding and different perspectives as we come together in one conversation as a community around one compelling book. And we have a terrific one this year, Properties of Thirst by Marianne Wiggins. It's going to be a great afternoon today. How did we get to this book? A fantastic selection committee made up of 14 avid readers in the community looked at scores and scores of books starting months ago till they whittled it down to the perfect choice that they thought would meet the needs of this year's program. And I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge those readers on the selection committee for the choice they made this year. If you give me just a moment, make sure I don't leave anyone out. So thank you to all of these members of this year's selection committee: Katie Brandon, Sharon Calkin, Rosemary Choate, Carrie Custer, Bob Donaldson, Brooke Larson-Garlock, Philip Hain, Jill Hunting, Sally Kauser, Tina Loventhal, Susanna Porras, Christine Reeder, Maggie Reyes-Rothner, and I've got a couple more. Deborah K. Sanchez and Mary Schuler. Thank you so much to this year's committee. The One City, One Story program started 22 years ago. And some of the original founding members of the selection committee are here with us today. You can see what an important tradition it's become. The idea started with the Library Commission, the library's advisory group that is appointed by our city council members. 22 years ago, the Library Commission said, wouldn't it be a great idea to pick one book for the entire community to come together and discuss? And it's been going on ever since. So I'd like to thank that original spark of an idea and our current Library Commission, which has been given its ongoing support to this program. So our current library chair, Mike Stammer, thank you, as well as the other members of the Library Commission, all of whom are here today. Thank you. I'll take a moment. And I'll take a moment to recognize them too. So thank you so much to our other commissioners: Adrian Bass, Judy Blanton, Chelsea Dickerson, Marian Gomez, Bo Patadian, and Leslie Rosenthal. Thank you to our commissioners. Thank you to our commissioners. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Always a good idea to check for your nearest exit. They're pretty much all around us, left, right, and behind us. Restrooms, the back of the sanctuary to the right, if you're looking for one of those. This is a conversation today, so we invite your questions for the author, and the way to do that is to take the program that you were given and jot down your question, and library staff will be happy to collect those, and given the time we've got, we'll get to as many of them as we can today. So we're looking forward to this being a conversation that you help us lead today with those questions. Book signings. Marianne Wiggins has volunteered to stay after the program to sign your copies of the book too. So please, we invite you to stay after to have that souvenir signed too. Let's see if I think I've got everything. The next person I have the pleasure of introducing is one of our founding sponsors for today's program, Janice Siegel, who is the president of the Friends of the Pasadena Public Library. Janice. Hi.
Hi, thank you for coming on this September day. The Friends of the Pasadena Public Library are the sponsoring founders of this program. We love it, and we're so glad that you're all here, and it's going to be a fascinating conversation. We really appreciate all the hard work, Christine Reeder, Tim, all the people at the library that work so hard to do all this. Ali Garcia, thank you. And thank you to Pasadena Presbyterian Church. Now, I have to say we are selling the book, and we also hope you join us as a friend. We have a table there, and you can join us anytime. Well, maybe not anytime. I'm not going to touch it.
You can hang on to it if you want to.
I'll hang on to it. Anyway, I loved the slide rule trombone group, and it synced so well with the images and the story map, and they didn't work together on that. So I'm pretty amazed. Thank you for coming.
Beside the Friends of the Pasadena Public Library, our other community sponsor on today's event is the Pasadena Literary Alliance Festival of Women Writers, which has been a tremendous partner on today's event and is helping us make the complimentary copies of the book available that we're at branches throughout the city. If you haven't got a copy yet, check one out. We've got it in print or electronic versions at the library, or if you'd like to own your own copy today, Janice and her team from the Friends of the Pasadena Public Library are selling copies at the back of the sanctuary today. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you District 3 Council Member Justin Jones, who will introduce the author. Great time. Good to see you.
Appreciate it.
Good to be here.
How's everybody doing? Oh, come on, it's raining outside. We're here to listen to One City, One Story. How's everybody doing? Yeah, there you go. You know, this is the 22nd anniversary of this community reading program, One City, One Story. And just as a local native, I've participated. Maybe I haven't attended every event, but I've read all of these stories for the last 22 years. And so they've really been very thought-provoking. They've been very engaging into the community. And so we're thankful for the Library Commission and everyone who's had a hand in selecting these books. And also, before I tailor off onto my notes, I just want to give a round of applause for our library director, Tim McDonald. Tim has done an excellent job. This is a year now. Yeah, it's a year. So he's done an excellent job, and we're thankful for your service in our city, in our community. And so this year's selection, Properties of Thirst, was celebrated throughout the month of March with an array of programming opportunities focusing on the themes of this book. Tonight's conversation with the author is the highlight and culmination of this year's annual One City, One Story program. Chosen from a field of thought-provoking nominees, this book is a novel that is both universal and intimate. It is the story of a changing American landscape, an examination of one of the darkest periods of this country's past, told through the stories of individual love and losses that weave together to form the fabric of our shared history, and ultimately is an unflinching of our nation's essence and a celebration of the bonds of love and family that persist against all odds.
Marianne, it's such a delight to have you here today.
Oh,
We've been
Tim,
looking
you're
forward
very
to this
kind.
day for several months now, and we're really excited to start this conversation. We
Thank
have someone
you.
else on stage to introduce today, too. Marianne's daughter, Laura Porznak, is here today, too.
Hi there. Thank you.
Yeah. So everybody's noticed over here on the left the dozens of other titles that have we've read over the years, and we have a new one to add. Properties of Thirst is joining the ranks of those books that we've discussed over the years. I will be honest with you. Over the years, people have been brutally honest with their opinions of the books we've chose, and I will hear if someone says, I didn't like the one you chose this year. No one has said that this year. This one has had universally, people are just gushing about this book. I think it's such a perfect fit for what we're trying to do with One City, One Story. Really take a difficult situation that we might have a hard time bringing up and talking about, and forcing us to really examine our own perspectives on issues.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you for writing this book.
Thank you.
Thank you to the selection committee for introducing me to an author I'd never read before, and now I have a whole list of books that I'm excited to read. So that's awesome. It's been a great discovery for us as a community, and we're so glad to have you today.
Thank you.
So I understand that the way the format we're thinking for today is starting out with a selection from the book and hearing you speak it in your own words, and then we'll shift over to a discussion and some questions and answers. So,
Good,
Marianne, what is the topic, what is the passage that you've selected to read to us today?
I'm reading the intake, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is a passage describing the arrival of Japanese American citizens to the internment camp. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar with what we as a nation did to our Japanese American citizens after the bombing at Pearl Harbor, they were collected, dehumanized, basically, taken from their homes and their neighborhoods, and assigned to Japanese internment camps, holding them outside their communities was reasoned by our Congress and our president at that time to be a safety measure. I don't think it would happen in our modern United States, but when I found out about this, I was an adult. I found out about it thanks to this person on my left, on a sort of vacation trip that we were taking. I'm not a Californian native. I was born on the East Coast in Pennsylvania. And so when I first moved here, and I moved here because of Laura, not that she needed me, and I'm also not permanently disabled. I had a stroke. I'm in a wheelchair, which I intend to outgrow once I recover my ambulatory capacity, and I'm told I will. And so when I moved here, Laura said, let's go up to Yosemite. And I was delighted. I really wanted to know this state. And on the highway, we passed signs for manzanar. And I said, what is that? And as we got closer, the state of California and the United States took it upon themselves to add U.S. internment camp to the sign advertising manzanar. And this is the first time I, as a responsible U.S. citizen, had heard that our nation had done that to fellow Americans. So I said, I want to see that. And once I saw it, and for those of you who have not visited Manzanar, it has been somewhat Disneyfied. There's a soundtrack, you can get earphones and revisit Manzanar with pretend noises of what the pretend community must have sounded like. And of course, it's all pleasant. Everybody's exchanging, hello, good morning. And, you know, that's obviously not the way that life on the ground was. The people who were interned had to take one suitcase with them and the clothes they wore. So imagine that mandate being settled upon you. What would you take from your household? You know, what memories are you going to be able to jam into the suitcase along with winter and summer and fall and clothes and your umbrellas and whatever else? I mean, it was a dehumanizing practice. And these were citizens of the United States, not people who were living in Japan. It would have been egregious for the United States to have imprisoned them, to just go after Tojo and the people who were responsible for the bombing of the Hawaiian Islands. So as soon as I had learned that the camp existed, I knew as an American novelist that I had to bring this back in front of our attention, because I think we as a nation need to keep our history before us and our historical transgressions so that we don't make the same mistakes again. We are a nation with on-the-ground prejudices against our fellow human beings, and we think that we're not. And granted, I love this country, but I do think it is the remit of American fiction writers to keep history alive, to keep our humanity alive. And that's my own personal remit. That's the kind of fiction I write. So if you're here for, have been brought in and you're not familiar with my writing, I don't write romances. I don't think I ever have, although there's romance and love stories inside my novels. They're not about women in bustiers and big crinoline skirts. They are about American citizens. And I lived in England for some time, so one of my novels is about English citizens as well. Read it anyway, because the English language is something that we share with English citizens, and we learned our colonial inclinations from our English forefathers. Since then, we've learned everything we can about colonial inclinations from other countries. But I think that it is the duty of literature to teach us how to be better people and not just entertain us. I hope that my novels are entertaining at some extent, that keep the reader. It's a long novel. I don't remember, but it's over 200 pages. So it's not going to take you a single day to read. There's some sort of investment in it. But I would hope that the novel reaches out and grabs your personality and honors your personality, but changes you somehow. That's the way I write. That's the way I want to write. And I hope that I will write that way in the future.
It's completely successful in taking us to Manzanar.
Thank you.
And imagining that.
Thank you.
If any of you haven't taken the trip to see Manzanar, I highly recommend it. It's a
Yes.
very important experience for us.
As I said, it is somewhat Disneyfied, but go to the information center afterwards, because Ansel Adams, if you're not familiar with his work, he's a photographer that should be recognized as a great American artist. More than he is. He should be on our money. He was moved to go up to Manzanar and document what life was like for the American citizens who were imprisoned there. And so the learning center there has his photographs, and they really are very moving. I strongly suggest, even before you start to read my book, go to Manzanar.
We would love to hear the description of the arrival of the internees to Manzanar.
Thank you. I'm going to read.
You may want to set up these characters as well.
Yeah,
just a little
okay.
bit.
Thank you, honey.
You're welcome.
I'm going to read about the arrival of Japanese American citizens to this place. They were collected in their neighborhood, transported, but no one told them what their fate was going to be. They were transported up to Manzanar, not really realizing that they've lost their community. Well, they kept their community, they became a community there, but they lost their livelihoods, that they were no longer going to be practicing as doctors or dentists or grocers or housewives. They were transported there with no deadline until who knows when. So they were in a state of, well, imagine if it happened to you, with no sense of when your former life was going to be restored to you, if ever. So they were walking around in a state of shock. And I was not alive during World War II. So I had to imagine this scene. And fortunately, as I said, the great American photographer Ansel Adams went up there and took photographs. So I had that to work off of, you know, the expression of people's faces, their posture, the way they held their shoulders. I had a visual stimulant. And many of the internees, after their period of internment and after the war was over, obviously, they were released. And many of them have written about the experience. So I had visual evidence to recreate scenes. I had visited Manzanar, so I had a ghostly sense. I don't want you to go away with the opinion that I hear ghosts. I don't. But as an American writer, I am aware of being in places where former human beings have been. And I'm very sensitive to the traces of their humanity and the traces of their history that are there, that are still there. So that's how I came to write the book. And at this point in my lengthy, rambling answer, I've forgotten the original question. If there was one.
No. I don't think there was.
So now I'll read about this intake, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where does it start?
Oh, your glasses could probably
Oh, yeah,
go
I am
on.
going to, that would help.
Do you want to lead in with Sunny's or jump right in with Shiv?
I want to jump right in.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to mention some names who are characters in this book. The story revolves around a burgeoning love affair, because let's face it, love affair stories sell books. So I wanted people to read this imaginative account of the internment camp. So I created a man who was the head of the camp, who was not the real I know I work very hard to understand what Scarlett O'Hara looked like before Vivian Leigh. And she didn't look like Vivian Lee. But now in my mind, she does. Clark Gable, yes, he was Rhett from the beginning. But, the Vivian Lee I still have problems with. And so I don't do that over-describing. I want my readers to be co-authors of the book, and I want to pull them in that way. So I don't over-describe. But Schiff, who is one of the main characters in this book, I never give him a first name. I don't really describe him, but I do go out of my way to emphasize that he is an American Jew. And the reason that I did that is that my inner sense was that I couldn't write a novel about an internment camp that the United States created without some echoing reference to the horrible, and I hope never to be repeated, internment camps in Europe of Jewish people. And so I balanced my horror to bring awareness to what we as a nation did to some of our ethnic citizens. I wanted to it made sense to me, perhaps not to you, but to me, to make the head of the camp a Jew. That would never have happened in the United States. This happened under Roosevelt, and Jews were not making upward progress in the layers of federal bureaucracy until after the Roosevelt administration, or somewhat during the Roosevelt administration. So I knew that there would never have been a Jew as the head of the internment camp. I knew that, but I went against that knowledge and figured if I make this guy believable enough, it's never going to occur to the reader that as a Jew, he wouldn't have that elevation in a bureaucracy. But I didn't want to ignore the fact that Manzanar was a miniature experience of what was happening in Europe with the Jewish population. So
it's such a fascinating decision because we see the pledge that he's made to the government to do this, perform this role, and his own moral compass and what he tells them to do, and it's just such a rich
Thank you.
point that he's in and his perspective. It's and I think you're right. How could you write a book about confining people during World War II without having a Jewish perspective, right? It's absolutely...
Well, I could have. It would have been, more popular than this. As I said, I do think that it's the role of American literature to reflect all of what influences us as citizenry, joined citizenry in a country. And I would rather write that kind of fiction than the kind of fiction that's sold on most drugstore racks. But that's just me. And nor am I condemning that kind of fiction. It serves its purpose. It's just not what I write. So now you can massively leave. Schiff is a character I have to give you the background of, which I have done. Who else is mentioned in this book? He has there is a love affair. I do need to sell copies of my book, and nothing is gonna have, books leave that drugstore rack than a love affair. And it's not consummated. See, people are leaving. told you. His object of love is a girl called Sunny. She's a blonde, she's not Jewish, she's a Western woman, rides horses, etc. But she also is a fabulous cook and owns a restaurant in, oh no, I forgot the name. What's the name of the town?
Lone Pine.
Lone Pine. Sorry, stroke, can I say? God's way of getting even with me. Here I'm sitting in a church. You know, if there's a lightning bolt, please know that's my contract with God. Schiff, the aforementioned Schiff, had estimated, oh, this is on intake day. The Japanese Americans were collected by force from primarily Los Angeles, but also there were small farms around. And this is only about the Los Angeles areas. I know there was all Japanese Americans on the West Coast, including in the state of Washington, were collected. And there were 8 or 9, forgive me, I don't remember, Japanese American internment camps in the western United States, Pasadena in Arizona, and I forget the names, sorry, again, stroke, all throughout the western United States. As I started to say, and then interrupted myself, I had not been taught this in my Eastern United States education. I did not know that we did this. And I felt that I had to write about this, to keep it current, to keep within our history, to keep this history alive, because believe me, in the last 200 and little years that we have been a nation, I'm sure there have been buried histories. Thank goodness within my lifetime, the histories of American Indians have started to come out thanks to, I forget his first name, Haley. What's Haley's first name? Thank you. You know who I'm talking about. The importation from Africa for slavery has started to become more widely talked about and widely known in the United States. When I was growing up, it wasn't public knowledge, you know, to the extent that it is now. Of course, I make it sound like I grew up before TV, but I was born before TV, and, you know, then any generations before me, if they wanted to learn about history, they had to read it or have a talkative grandmother and grandfather, but you couldn't believe the grandmother's histories. They're always slanted through personal experience. So if we were going to learn about the internment of Japanese Americans, we have to keep it alive either in our cinema, which has become entertainment, or through our literature or television. So, yeah, I'm going to read. They didn't come to hear me talk. So Schiff is the Jewish head of the camp. Schiff had estimated there would be 10,000, but the mind resists that number. Now she was ashamed of this. She certainly had never thought of them as middle class or better. But here they were, wearing their best shoes, their good dresses, coats, and hats. Is that the end of the reading?
Nope,
It is.
You're going to go right here.
Hold on. Most were wearing layered clothing, sweaters, jackets, and underneath their coats to save the space inside their suitcases. Too few wore footwear suitable to the trade, and many of the women wore what furs they had, fox or muskrat, and feathered hats. That they were unprepared was a statement of such moral equivalency that within the first hour she, being Sunny, had worked herself into a state of silent outrage. Worse than the internees' unpreparedness was the government's. The state was unprepared for this. The facility was unprepared. The authority that had issued the order for detention was unprepared. Detention, as a theory, was hard enough to rationalize for citizens who had not committed any crime. But the nuts and bolts of that argument, the retaining walls of it, looked shoddy and more disgraceful. There was sporadic water from the standpipes. The women's toilets were without partitions inside, and they overlooked the women's showers. Rats were seen beneath the mess halls. Rats commuted between the mess tents. There was nowhere to sit. Pocket mice were at the tuft around the doors. Many of the barracks had no glass yet. Most windows were cladded against the wind with only paper. Dust, byproduct of the depleted soil, blew everywhere until some enlisted genius had the inspiration to hose down the intake area to puke-colored mud. Rocky, who, I'm sorry, I've forgotten if I've described him, he owns a farm, a ranch in Owens Valley, and he's Sonny's, the heroine, father. Okay. Rocky, now I've lost my place. Rocky had refused the call for local residents to turn out along the road and on the street in Lone Pine to welcome the arrivals. Never, he had said. But Sonny had arrived with a pickup loaded with tangerines and oranges. Church ladies from Lone Pine and Independence dispensed weak tea in waxed paper cups and handed out brochures advising of Christ's mercy. And the family from the hardware store was already taking orders for washboards, enamel basins, pitchers, and piss pots. With their Manila Camp identification tags tied to their coat buttons, the arrivees looked like merchandise themselves, discounted and reduced in value, especially the children, on whom the 5-inch tags looked so much larger by proportion. The church ladies had provided lollipops, their cheap cherry-flavored fructose of which had turned the children's lips a shocking red, adding to the disturbing illusion that they might be life-size dolls. When Schiff had said 10,000, Sonny had not foreseen so many of them as children, nor had she foreseen the elderly, the infirm, all the women, wives and mothers, women who had maintained homes, cared for families, shopped for groceries, cooked. Now they stood in their best shoes in the mud with dazed looks of displacement, as if in their distraction they'd failed to bring along the thing they loved the most. Oh, you're very kind. Thanks.
Good job, Mom.
Okay.
The focus today is on your book, but I know our audience is very curious to get to know you too and your writing
thanks,
process.
Tim. Yeah, thanks.
Can you let us know a little bit about the progress of this book? You mentioned earlier that you suffered a stroke. I think that was in 2016, before this book was finished being written. Can you talk to us about how your writing process changed afterwards and how the book was completed?
Well, this person to my left has become, in the blossoming of her womanhood, her mother's caretaker. And I'm a rather large person in terms of my intellectual pursuits, not so much in my physical pursuits, especially now, but she takes care of everything. And before anything in my life, before the needs of anything in my life, my first need is to write fiction. And so she just took that over.
Wow.
And sort of went through, well, I'm speaking for you, and that's not fair. But I had taken extensive notes on the future of the book. And I believe firmly, I've learned from experience that a beginning novelist must know the end of his or her work, how the story is going to end, and then you write toward that end. You lard the story, you drop clues, so that when the reader gets to the end, he or she feels that he or she should have known that all along, as opposed to a surprise ending. You know, there are places for surprise endings. Death is a good place for a surprise ending. Or mystery story has a surprise ending, or a surprise revelation. But a piece of literature should be, well, exactly that, revelation. The truth at the beginning should become revealed at the end, so that the reader can say to his or herself, I knew it was that person. I knew that was going to happen. Not because the reader is a genius, but because the author has made a roadmap toward the end of the story and then taken the roadmap away. But the author should know how the story is going to end, and then leave subtle clues. Don't give away the ending, because then why is the person going to keep going through 300 pages? But suggest the ending. And I think there's something human about that too, because none of us know our endings, and it's comforting to be inside a story that will have a revelation of how it ends, because none of us know how we are going to end, despite all of our investments and buildings and faith. We just don't know. And so that's the way I write my books. Some people write differently, and I'm not making a moral judgment. I'm just saying the way I work, period. Did I?
Thank you.
I forget.
Yes,
but,
it does.
Okay, good.
And it was beautifully said, and I'm so glad that you didn't give the ending away, which is
Oh.
which we won't spoil for those that haven't read it yet, but it's fantastic and very emotional ending to the book. Can we talk a little bit about food? You mentioned it
Sure.
earlier. Food is a very important part of this book, and the descriptions are mouth-watering, throughout the book. And it seems to provide a connection for Sunny to her mom, Lou. Why is food that connection? Why is food such an important part of Properties of Thirst?
It doesn't serve a plot point, but does serve to reveal something about the author. I think I'm a good cook.
You're an excellent cook.
I'm an excellent cook. You heard it from the horse's mouth. It's why I bring her along. And my father was a grocer, and my mother's father was a grocer. So I have stories about food in my personal history. And I lived in Europe, lived in London for more than a decade, and would go to Europe across the channel to visit Paris, where I had also lived before Laura was born. Laura was born in Rome, and so I have the experience of no supermarkets available. And street markets were where I bought my food, and I love that experience, going out the door with a market basket and, market bags, and, really picking out the produce that looked the best and wasn't covered in cellophane. I love the whole ritual of selecting food and coming home and making food. And so it was natural for me to write about that experience. And also, I think that if it were mandated at me, to not be able to cook or to not have control over what I consumed or what how my family was fed, I would feel diminished as a human being. So that was important to me. When one is incarcerated, and I haven't been put in jail, I try to live a crimeless life, although I am a writer, so I'm sure I transgress against some golden rules. Be careful what you say in front of me. I may steal it, but I feel that I have a license to do that. So I tried to imagine what it must be like, and I was, to a certain extent, did have that experience because one of my husbands, and I say one of them because I've been married
500 times.
500 times, wrote a book. He is a novelist, and he wrote a book that offended Islam. And so he and I were put under protection of Scotland Yard. We lived in England, and so I know what a proscribed, guarded life feels like. I had that emotional experience. And so I was able to translate that onto the page and translate the difference in the physicality of it, but the emotionality of it, I knew, and sort of brought that personal experience. This is not a work of science fiction. It's a work of what I imagined people lived through, and I pulled on my own experience somewhat, only somewhat. I mean, I'm not of Asian extraction, and I didn't live in the 40s, so I had to pull out of my imagination and also out of my reading and also out of having the privilege of living in the latter part of the 20th century when photography provides physical evidence of what life might have been like in this century. So I had all of those clues available to me to create an imaginary fabric.
What a fascinating way to layer your own emotional and personal experience onto this story and let us feel and be able to imagine it with you. It's fascinating.
Well,
yeah.
this is the era of confessional books. And I still believe in the power of fiction to be instructive to of humanity. I don't feel that the personal memoir or the Oprahification of personal experience is necessary. And I know that that creates a lot of viable discussion among us. Most specifically, does a man have the right to write about what it's like to be a woman? Well, I don't know what you ever thought of Madame Bovary, but guess what? It wasn't written by Madame Bovary. It was written by a man, and it has been raised, I mean, the philosophical discussion has occurred across races as well. Does a white person have the right or the chemistry to write about what a person of color's experience is in this society? And I can't give you an honest answer about that because I'm conflicted about that. So to a certain extent, I have transgressed and thought about what it was like to be a male American Jew living in 1940s, and also Americans of Asian descent living under these circumstances. That's what we expect of our writers, to take this imaginative leap for us, and the way that we expect people who are performing ballet to know what the hell they're doing when they take a leap. We don't want to see them fall and break a leg, or maybe we do, but we trust that they will have had the rigorous training, and I feel that I do write rigorous prose. I don't break the laws of grammar, and I respect those who have written before me, and to keep the tradition of fiction in the traditional way alive.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
There's another.
Thank you.
We've talked about this beautiful setting in the Owens Valley, but I think there's another connection to us in Southern California that we haven't really taken a dive into yet. Thinking about the water. So, ironically, we're on this misty day outside. I checked the weather.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
Lone Pine is a nice sunny day up there, and we've got the rain down here.
Yeah.
What made you bring in water rights into this story? Why were you interested in that?
Well, I don't think you can live in Los Angeles City. This is it's the second largest city in the United States, right? Yes. Historically, if you look at a map of the world, historically, large cities or cities have been grown by rivers or near the ocean, or somewhere where, not necessarily near the ocean, but somewhere where there was fresh water to sustain the population. Guess what happened with Los Angeles? There's not enough fresh water there to sustain this massive population. Is it the second largest city in the United States? There's no water. We have to transport water from other states, sometimes as far as other states. Overland, walking water is what the Indians called it. Yeah. And so I wanted to include that. here was a large internment camp where there were standpipes, they had to have toilets, running water. And where was that water coming from? Aside from all the moral issues of we as a government interning these individuals, where we decided to do it was in the desert. How are those individuals going to live? And, water for all of us as Californians is a major theme, so I couldn't turn my back on that. I wanted to address it, and so I did.
Yeah, thank you. Marianne, we're collecting some questions from the audience now, and I'll ask the library staff to bring them up to me so I can share those with you.
I
In the
thought you were
meantime, while we're
taking-
waiting for those...
While we're collecting things,
Yeah.
Donations.
That'll work too. We've got this terrific book that's inviting the community to get together and talk about the themes in the book.
Oh.
Is there anything that you recommend that we talk about that you want this book to spark a dialogue about any particular issues or themes or what's happening in the book that we need as a society to be talking about?
Well, the subjects that I have taken up and have voiced here are still subjects that we're facing as American citizens. Water, our natural resources, and how we envision ourselves as Americans, and how we are treating our minority citizens seems to be an ongoing question to us. So I'm hoping that will echo. I mean, that sounds like another homework assignment for all of you. I think I write pleasurable books. I hope so. I mean, the love affair is successful, so that should keep you going. And the food should keep you going. And there's a happy ending for...
Oh, let's not tell the ending.
Okay.
We're not gonna tell the ending. Yep, zip it.
There's a happy ending.
Zip it.
I've got some fantastic questions, and I'm looking at the clock, and unfortunately we're not going to get to all of them, but let me rifle through as many as I can. The title. Can you tell us about what the title means to you, and was it your original title, or did it have a working title before this?
It had a different working title, which I can't remember.
6 miles.
Was it 6?
6 miles south.
South of Independence. There's a town here in California called Independence. It's north of it's on the 395, that's 395 north of Manzanar. I'm not pushing Independence as a place for you to visit. There's kind of nothing there.
It's beautiful.
But it's a hell of a name for a town. And Manzanar is six miles south of it. So that was the working, and it was supposed to be a pun on independence, because obviously the people behind the barbed wire had no independence. So it was for a long time called 6 miles south, wasn't it?
South of Independence. And why did you change it to Properties of Thirst?
Because I thought 6 miles south of Independence needed that kind of explanation. And that, people wouldn't know what it meant. And I don't remember, please forgive me, I'm really trying to remember. I don't remember how I settled on Properties of Thirst. But there's a pun involved, and that was attractive to me. Because of property, I don't have to explain to you, I'm not your 5th grade teacher. So I just like the sound of Properties of Thirst better. And it does refer to the book. I mean, the book lives up to the title, and the title apostrophizes the book. So that's how I settled on it.
One of our audience members says that this book is a love letter to the Owens Valley, and felt like this book talks about the West like Wallace Stegner and others.
Oh, thank you.
That's a nice compliment. How did you manage to evoke the experience of living in the West, especially knowing that you weren't born in the West, you were born in the East?
Well,
Yeah.
I guess I was sensitive. You know, I just don't go somewhere and walk through the experience. I'm a novelist. I have been a novelist for over 20 years, for over 30 years now, I guess.
Even more.
Oh, well, let's keep it at 30.
Okay, fair enough.
And so when I go somewhere, I take in where's the light coming from, what's the quality of light, what would people hear if, you know, through the night, what would it be like to be a citizen here? It's just my nature. Maybe I'm part squirrel. I do that. And when Laura took me to Manzanar, it was alive with story. I could feel the stories on the ground, and it pissed me off that works of art hadn't come out of this place, and I felt the mandate that I had to write this story.
This is more of a history question, I think, so we'll forgive you if you don't know the answer to this one. Was there really a movement to provide funds to save people's homes like the one you described in the book? Or is that fictional?
No, it's not
Okay.
fictional.
That's
Okay.
Marianne's
That's good to know.
imagination.
Yeah.
Well, you got two different answers,
Yeah.
so you can choose. No, there really was.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Good. Very good.
It was never very much money. It was only, you know, it was under.
Well, I'm sure there was neighborly
Yeah.
love given.
Yeah.
But
Question about your process. What tips do you have for new writers? Some of
Oh,
whom we
wow.
have in the audience right
Read.
now. Yeah.
Read, 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 read.
At the library.
You know, sharpen your discernment. Read bad fiction. Read commercial fiction and pick it apart and see for yourself why it's called commercial. And then read classical stories and pick it apart and determine for yourself why some stories last thousands of years and why some stories last thousands of minutes. and you know, that's, teach yourself and decide which one sets you on fire. And whichever one is going to do that is going to be the kind of writer that you are.
Marianne, we have fallen in love with your book,
Oh,
and
thank
today
you.
we have fallen in love with you.
Oh,
Thank you so much for joining
thanks.
us today.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
My last question is, what can we expect next? What are we going to look for?
Another book.
Okay.
oh,
Anything more we can know yet?
I'm thinking, I've never talked about my ideas before I bring my ideas to fruition, especially in a church. I mean, I could be struck, well, I've already been stricken, but I could be struck with more precision, and I don't want to make God angry.
Okay. We'll wait for it then. We'll be patient. Thanks. Marianne has agreed to stay after tonight's program and sign copies of books. If you've got one available, we'll set up a table in the back. But please join me in thanking Marianne Wiggins and Laura Porzak for today's program.
No, thank you. Thank you,
Tim.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.